She spent her entire life savings to free a slave. She didn't realize she just put a leash on a king. Now, Maya is broke, hungover, and stuck in a one-bedroom apartment with the deadliest alpha in the Shadowlands, who is magically forced to obey her every command. Chapter 1. It wasn't just a breakup. It was an eviction notice for her heart. Maya stared down at her phone, the screen glowing blurry through her tears in the dimly lit bar. "It's not you. It's me," the text read. Simple, cruel, cowardly. The cheap red wine swirling in her stomach turned sour, burning its way up her throat. She didn't have enough cash to buy another glass to wash away the taste. She barely had enough to cover rent next week, let alone drown her sorrows properly. The bartender slammed a rag onto the counter, the universal signal to get out. Maya gathered her coat, feeling small, discarded, like a candy wrapper thrown on the sidewalk. She stumbled out into the night. Rain lashed against her face, cold and biting, mixing with the hot tears tracking down her cheeks. She needed to walk. She needed to be anywhere but here. Her feet carried her away from her tiny apartment, away from the life that felt like it was crumbling. The city shifted around her. Streetlights flickered, buzzing like angry hornets. The buildings grew taller, darker, their windows like empty eyes watching her stumble. She shouldn't be here. This part of town was shadows and secrets. Yet, her legs kept moving. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just the wine making her reckless. The rain picked up, soaking through her thin jacket. She shivered. Then she saw it. A faint purple glow down an alleyway. A sign buzzed the gilded cage. It looked like a theater. An old, forgotten place where maybe, just maybe, she could hide from the storm and sit in the dark for a while. She wanted to disappear. A strange chill ran down her spine as she approached the heavy metal door, but she didn't stop. It wasn't locked. As if pulled by a string, she pushed it open. The smell hit her first. Not popcorn, not old velvet. It smelled like expensive perfume covering up something metallic. Something like blood? Her head swam. Music thumped from deep inside, a heavy, rhythmic drum beat that matched the pounding in her skull. She stumbled down a long hallway, her heels clicking unevenly on the concrete. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But then, she remembered the empty apartment waiting for her. The silence. She couldn't face the silence. She pushed through the velvet curtains at the end of the hall. The room opened up. It was massive. Underground. Rows of wealthy people in masks sat in plush chairs, holding numbered paddles. They were silent, watching, waiting. And on the stage, there was a cage. Maya blinked, trying to clear the fog of alcohol. A cage? Her breath caught. It wasn't an animal inside. It was a man. It wasn't just a breakup. It was an eviction notice for her heart. Maya stared down at her phone, the screen glowing blurry through her tears in the dimly lit bar. "It's not you. It's me," the text read. Simple, cruel, cowardly. The cheap red wine swirling in her stomach turned sour, burning its way up her throat. She didn't have enough cash to buy another glass to wash away the taste. She barely had enough to cover rent next week, let alone drown her sorrows properly. The bartender slammed a rag onto the counter, the universal signal to get out. Maya gathered her coat, feeling small, discarded, like a candy wrapper thrown on the sidewalk. She stumbled out into the night. Rain lashed against her face, cold and biting, mixing with the hot tears tracking down her cheeks. She needed to walk. She needed to be anywhere but here. Her feet carried her away from her tiny apartment, away from the life that felt like it was crumbling. The city shifted around her. Streetlights flickered, buzzing like angry hornets. The buildings grew taller, darker, their windows like empty eyes watching her stumble. She shouldn't be here. This part of town was shadows and secrets. Yet, her legs kept moving. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just the wine making her reckless. The rain picked up, soaking through her thin jacket. She shivered. Then she saw it. A faint purple glow down an alleyway. A sign buzzed the gilded cage. It looked like a theater, an old, forgotten place where maybe, just maybe, she could hide from the storm and sit in the dark for a while. She wanted to disappear. A strange chill ran down her spine as she approached the heavy metal door, but she didn't stop. It wasn't locked. As if pulled by a string, she pushed it open. The smell hit her first. Not popcorn, not old velvet. It smelled like expensive perfume covering up something metallic. Something like blood? Her head swam. Music thumped from deep inside, a heavy, rhythmic drumbeat that matched the pounding in her skull. She stumbled down a long hallway, her heels clicking unevenly on the concrete. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But then, she remembered the empty apartment waiting for her. The silence. She couldn't face the silence. She pushed through the velvet curtains at the end of the hall. The room opened up. It was massive. Underground. Rows of wealthy people in masks sat in plush chairs, holding numbered paddles. They were silent, watching, waiting. And on the stage, there was a cage. Maya blinked, trying to clear the fog of alcohol. A cage? Her breath caught. It wasn't an animal inside. It was a man.
Iron, cold and heavy. Cyrus tested the weight of the manacles around his wrists. They were thick, etched with suppression runes that stung his skin like nettles. But they wouldn't hold him. Not really. If he wanted to, he could snap them like dry twigs. He didn't want to. Not yet. He sat in the darkness backstage, his back against the damp concrete wall. He was the bait, the trap. To catch the syndicate, he had to become their prize. Even so, the indignity burned in his chest, a fire hotter than the branding iron they had threatened him with earlier. He closed his eyes. He didn't need sight to know where he was. He could smell them. Vampires. Their scent was cloying, like rotting flowers. Demons, sulfur, and ash. And the humans, they smelled of greed, sweat, and arrogance. The handler approached the bars of his holding cell. A small, nervous man with a cattle prod. "Get up, beast." The handler sneered, jabbing the prod through the bars. Sparks flew. Cyrus didn't flinch. He slowly opened his eyes, letting the violet light of his wolf bleed into his irises. The handler stumbled back, fear spiking in his scent, sour and sharp. Good. Let them be afraid. The heavy door to the stage creaked open. The roar of the crowd was a muffled hum, like a hive of wasps. "It's time," the handler stammered. Cyrus stood. He rose to his full height, towering over the small man. Chains rattled a grim music that promised violence. He allowed the heavy collar to be snapped around his neck. A fresh wave of anger surged through his blood. His wolf paced just beneath his skin, scratching to get out. Soon, he promised the beast inside. Soon we feast. They dragged him toward the light. The stage was bright, blindingly so. He stepped out, the chains dragging on the floor behind him. The noise of the crowd died instantly. Silence. He looked out at them. Masks, hiding their faces, but not their sins. They thought they were buying a slave. They thought they were bidding on a gladiator for their fighting pits. What they didn't know was that they were inviting the king of the Shadowlands into their home. He scanned the front row. He needed to find the leader, the one with the scent of old blood. But then, the wind shifted. The heavy air of the underground room was cut by something fresh, something soft, lavender, tears, and cheap grapes. His head snapped up. His gaze locked on the back of the room. A woman stood there. She wasn't wearing a mask. She looked small, fragile, swaying slightly on her feet. And she was looking right at him. Not with hunger, not with greed. She looked horrified.
The world tilted. Maya gripped the velvet back of the chair in front of her to keep from falling. It wasn't a play. It wasn't a show. This was wrong. On the stage, the man was massive, terrifying. Scars crisscrossed his chest like a roadmap of pain. Chains the size of her arm held him down. but it was his eyes that froze her heart. They were violet, burning, glowing, violet. The auctioneer, a man in a slick tuxedo, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we present a rare specimen, a feral gladiator, a beast from the north. The crowd murmured. Paddles went up. 500. 1,000. 2,000. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. They were selling him, like a piece of furniture, like he was nothing. Suddenly, the image of the man on stage blurred. She didn't see a monster. She saw herself. Discarded, unwanted, trapped in a life she couldn't escape. The pain on his face masked by anger, but she saw it mirrored the ache in her own chest. Why wasn't anyone stopping this? 3,000! A voice shouted near the front. Rage, hot and sudden, bubbled up inside her. It mixed with the wine and made her head spin. No one should be in a cage. No one. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She stumbled forward, pushing past a waiter. "Stop it!" she yelled. Her voice cracked, loud and ungraceful in the hush of the room. Heads turned. Masks stared at her. Blank, creepy eyes. The auctioneer paused, looking annoyed. "Miss, do you have a bid?" Maya panted. Her hands were shaking. She reached into her pocket, clutching her phone. Her bank app was open. Her savings. Every cent she had scraped together for years. It was her safety net. Air escape plan. If she did this, she would have nothing. She would be on the street. She looked at the man on stage. He was staring right at her. His gaze was intense, heavy. It felt like he could see her soul. No one. She slurred slightly, tears leaking from her eyes again. No one belongs in a cage. She took a breath. $5,000, she screamed. I bid 5,000. The room went deadly silent. The auctioneer laughed nervously. 5,000 going once. Anyone? No? He is a dangerous one, folks. He raised the gavel. Maya held her breath. What am I doing? Panic whispered. Stop. But she couldn't. Bang. Sold. To the lady in the back. Her knees gave out. She sank to the floor. She had just bought a person. She was broke. She was drunk. And now, she owned a monster.
She was vibrating. That was the first thing Cyrus noticed as they dragged him backstage. The woman, the girl, really was, standing there, shaking like a leaf in a storm. The guards shoved him toward her. He caught himself, planting his feet so he wouldn't crash into her small frame. He towered over her. He could snap her neck with one hand. He should be furious. His plan was ruined. He wasn't supposed to be sold to a random human. He was supposed to go to the syndicate leader's compound. But then, he smelled her fear. It wasn't the fear of him. It was the fear of what she had done. Here's the keys, the handler grunted, tossing a ring of rusted metal at her. He's your problem now. No refunds. The handler left, eager to get away from the violet fire in Cyrus's eyes. Now, it was just them. The silence stretched. Cyrus waited. He waited for a command. Kneel, follow, strip. That's what they always said. Instead, she stepped closer. She smelled like cheap wine and pure, breaking sadness. Her hands fumbled with the keys. She couldn't find the lock on his cuffs because her eyes were swimming with tears. I can't, she whimpered, struggling with the metal. She looked up at him. Her eyes were brown, warm, soft. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Wait. She was sorry? With a click, the manacles fell from his wrists. The heavy iron hit the concrete floor with a clang. He rubbed his wrists, staring at her. She had the key to the collar in her hand. She stood on her tiptoes, swaying, and unlocked that too. The heavy weight dropped from his neck. He was free, truly free. He could leave. He could kill everyone in this building right now. You're free, big guy, she mumbled, her words running together. She pressed the cold keys into his massive palm. Her fingers were freezing. Go home. She turned to walk away, but her legs finally gave up. Without thinking, he reached out. His arm, thick with muscle and scarred from 1,000 battles, caught her before she hit the floor. She was tiny, light, and then it happened. As the bond pulsed, heat, white-hot and blinding, seared into his skin where he touched her. It wasn't a burn. It was magic. Old magic. Deep magic. The life debt. His eyes widened. He looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms. She had saved him. She had spent everything she had to free him, asking for nothing in return. The old laws were clear. A life for a life. A growl rose in his throat. It wasn't anger this time. It was resignation. He couldn't go back to the Shadowlands. He couldn't return to his war. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered to her sleeping face. He scooped her up, holding her against his chest. She curled into him, seeking his warmth. He was the king of wolves. He was the apex predator, and now he belonged to her.
The sun felt like a personal attack. Maya groaned, burying her face in a pillow that smelled like stale hairspray and bad decisions. Her head throbbed a rhythmic, dull ache behind her eyes that synced perfectly with the ticking of the clock. Thump, thump, thump. She tried to piece together the night before. Wine, rain, a purple neon sign, and then, shouting, $5,000. Her eyes snapped open. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the hangover fog. She sat up, the room spinning. No, 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 no. She hadn't. She couldn't have. She fumbled for her phone on the nightstand. The banking app was still open, mocking her. Balance, $12.42. Oh, God, she whispered, the words scraping her dry throat. She had spent her life savings on a person. A smell hit her. Bacon and scorched butter? Maya lived alone. She had lived alone since her ex moved out 3 months ago, taking the good toaster and her self-esteem with him. Fear spiked in her chest. Someone was in her apartment. She grabbed the only weapon she had, a heavy hardcover book, from the floor and crept toward the bedroom door. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She moved down the short hallway, the floorboards creaking under her bare feet. The kitchen was tiny, a shoebox where you couldn't open the fridge and the oven at the same time. But as she rounded the corner, the room shrank. He was there. The man from the stage. The beast. He took up the entire space. His head nearly brushed the peeling paint on the ceiling. He wore the same tattered pants from the auction, his massive back scarred and broad, muscles shifting like tectonic plates as he moved. He stood at her stove, holding her tiny, warped frying pan in a hand big enough to crush a skull. Maya forgot to breathe. He turned. Up close, he was terrifying. His face was a landscape of harsh angles and old violence, bisected by a jagged scar running down his cheek. But his eyes, those violet eyes, burned with an intelligence that made her knees weak. "You're awake," he said. His voice was a low rumble. It vibrated in her chest, deeper than thunder. Maya gripped the book tighter, her knuckles turning white. "Who? What are you doing in my kitchen?" He gestured to the pan with a spatula that looked like a toy in his grip. "This vessel is inadequate. The heat distribution is uneven." "My pan?" she squeaked. "You're critiquing my cookware? You were in a cage last night. And you bought me," he countered, his gaze narrowing. He didn't look like a slave. He looked like a king who had momentarily misplaced his throne. "You purchased my freedom with blood on your hands." He pointed to her hand. Maya looked down. A dried smear of blood stained her palm from when she'd tripped unlocking his cage. He took a step toward her. The air in the kitchen grew heavy, charged with static. "I didn't mean to keep you," Maya blurted out, backing up until she hit the refrigerator. "I was drunk. I wanted you to go home. Why are you here?" He stopped, looming over her. The smell of him, rain, ozone, and wild musk drowned out the bacon. "I cannot leave," he growled, frustration leaking into his tone. "You triggered the life debt. Until the value of my life is repaid. I am stuck in this hovel. He surveyed the peeling wallpaper and the linoleum floor with a sneer. The place was a personal insult to his existence. Maya slid down the fridge door, clutching her head. She was broke, she was hungover, and now she had a 7-foot-tall magical roommate who hated her cookware.
Cyrus fought the urge to shift and tear the walls down. Maya had retreated to the bathroom to process. He could hear her muttering to herself through the thin door. The place was a structural nightmare. It smelled of human fragility and lemon cleaner. It was a cage, just as surely as the iron bars had been. He paced the small living room. 3 steps, turn. 3 steps, turn. His wolf paced with him, agitated. Pack, the beast whispered. Protect. No, Cyrus snapped back mentally. Captor, he needed to test the parameters. The old laws were binding, but every magic had a loophole. He walked to the front door. It was flimsy wood, held shut by a lock a child could pick. He reached for the handle. A searing pain lashed across his chest. It felt like a whip made of fire. He hissed, jerking his hand back. The mark of the debt, an intricate knot of shadow and light, glowed faintly on his pectoral muscle. He tried again. He grabbed the knob, focusing his will. I am King Cyrus of the Shadowlands. I command my own legs to move. He pushed the door open. He took a step onto the threshold. Wham! An invisible force slammed into him, a battering ram made of air. It threw him backward. He crashed into the opposite wall, knocking a framed picture askew. The air left his lungs in a rush. He slid to the floor, growling low in his throat. It wasn't just a barrier. It was a tether. He was physically bound to her location. If she moved, he had to move. If she stayed, he stayed. The bathroom door opened. Maya stepped out. She was dressed in an oversized gray suit that had seen better days. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked determined, or maybe just terrified. She saw him on the floor. Her eyes widened. Did you just fight my door? Cyrus stood up, dusting off his pants with as much dignity as he could muster. Your wards are aggressive. I don't have wards, she said, grabbing a bag. I have a job, which I am late for, because I spent the night buying a giant. She grabbed the doorknob. Look, just stay here. Don't break anything. Don't eat the neighbors. I'll figure this out when I get back. She stepped out into the hallway. An invisible hook tugged behind Cyrus's navel, a visceral, sickening lurch. The magic wasn't asking him to follow. It was dragging him. I cannot stay, he gritted out, forcing his feet to remain planted. Sweat beaded on his brow. The pain returned, doubling in intensity. It felt like his bones were being ground to dust. He took a step forward, gasping. The pain vanished. He took another step. She was the anchor. He was the ship. And the chain was very, very short. You have to take me with you, he said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. Maya spun around in the hallway. What? No, I work at a coffee shop. I can't bring a gladiator to work. You don't even fit in my car. Then we walk, Cyrus said, stepping into the hall. He glared at her. Do not mistake this for loyalty, little owner. I follow because the alternative is my internal organs liquefying.
Maya walked fast, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the pavement. People were staring. Of course they were staring. She was a 5'0" Omega in a cheap suit, being trailed by a man who looked like he ate tanks for breakfast. Cyrus didn't just walk, he stalked. He moved with a lethal grace, his eyes scanning every rooftop, every alley, every passing car. He radiated a do not disturb energy so strong that pedestrians literally stepped into traffic to avoid him. Stop growling at the mailman, Maya hissed over her shoulder. He smelled of deceit, Cyrus rumbled, not slowing down. He smelled of envelopes. Chill out. This was a disaster. Her boss, Gary, was going to fire her. She was already on thin ice for being late 3 times this month. if she showed up with him. They reached the corner of her street. A bus was pulling away. Damn it! Maya ran a few steps, but it was gone. She spun around, frustration boiling over. The headache was back, the stress of the debt, the fear of losing her job. It was too much. She looked at Cyrus. He was standing in the middle of the sidewalk, blocking the path of a woman with a stroller. He was examining a parking meter with deep suspicion. "Cyrus!" she snapped. He turned. Violet fire locked onto hers. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch. "I need you to stop," she said, her voice shaking. "I need you to just sit down and wait for me to figure this out. I can't do this with you hovering." He opened his mouth to argue, to tell her that he was a king and he did not wait. The command left her lips before she could stop it. "Sit!" she shouted, pointing at the bench behind him. The world seemed to freeze. The magic slammed down. It wasn't subtle. It was a hammer of authority. Cyrus's eyes went wide with shock. His mouth snapped shut. His massive body betrayed him. His knees buckled. He didn't sit. He was forced down. He dropped onto the wooden bench with a force that made the slats groan. His hands slammed onto his knees, locking into place. He froze, rigid, a statue of pure, unadulterated fury. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I didn't." She watched, horrified. She saw the muscles in his neck straining, cords of tension popping as he fought against her voice. He was fighting it with everything he had, but he couldn't move. He was trapped by her word. The silence stretched between them, tight and suffocating. She saw the humiliation burn in his eyes. It was a deep, violet shame. She had treated him like a dog. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping toward him. "Stand up. Please, stand up." The tension broke. The magic released him. Cyrus surged to his feet, breathing hard. He looked at her, and for the first time, Maya felt true fear. Not of the monster, but of what she had done to the man. "Never," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous vibration that shook her bones. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "Do not ever use that voice on me again." Her chest ached with guilt. "I won't, I promise." As they continued walking in silence, the distance between them felt wider than the ocean. She realized then that she didn't just own his freedom, she owned his will. And that was a far more dangerous thing to hold.
The den was freezing. Cyrus stood in the center of the cramped living room, his breath puffing out in white clouds. The heater rattled a dying, metallic cough, and then fell silent. The temperature in the apartment dropped rapidly, matching the plummeting patience of his wolf. He looked at Maya. She was still in her work uniform, smelling of burnt coffee beans and exhaustion, wrapped in 3 blankets on the couch. Her teeth chattered a sound that grated on his nerves like a file against bone. "It's fine," she shivered, her voice small. "The landlord said he'd fix it. Eventually." Eventually. Cyrus narrowed his eyes. In the Shadowlands, if a king's quarters were cold, heads rolled. Here, apparently, one simply froze. A heavy fist pounded on the door. "Rent's due, Maya. I know you're in there." Maya flinched. The scent of her anxiety, sour and sharp, filled the room. She stood up, shedding the blankets, shrinking into herself. I have it," she whispered. She moved to the door, opening it a crack. A man stood there, greasy, smelling of cheap tobacco and sweat. He loomed over her, eyes wandering inappropriately. "Heating's extra this month, sweetheart. Parts are expensive." Cyrus didn't think. He moved. He didn't walk. He flowed, a shadow detaching itself from the wall. He reached over Maya's shoulder, planting a hand on the doorframe, effectively boxing the man in. The landlord looked up, and up, and up. His lecherous grin faltered as he met the violet inferno of Cyrus's gaze. Who are you?" the man stammered. "I am the one inquiring about the temperature," Cyrus said. His voice was soft, dangerously soft, like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. Why does my employer shiver in her own home? Heaters busted, the landlord grunted, trying to regain bravado. Old building, pipes are shot. Cyrus looked at the exposed steel pipe running along the door frame. Pipes are strong, he mused. He reached up. With 2 fingers, he pinched the thick steel pipe. He didn't grimace. He didn't strain. He simply squeezed. Scree. The metal groaned in agony, crimping and folding like wet cardboard under his touch. The landlord's face went pale. He stared at the crushed metal, then back at Cyrus's hand. Iron is obedient, Cyrus whispered, leaning closer until the man could smell the predator on him. It bends to superior strength. I wonder, are you as durable as iron? I'll fix it, the landlord squeaked. Sweat beaded on his lip despite the cold. Right now, I have a spare unit downstairs. See that you do, Cyrus said. And the rent? Next week, the man yelped, backing away. Next week is fine. He turned and ran. Cyrus closed the door. He turned back to Maya. He expected fear. He expected her to scold him again. Instead, she stared at him with wide eyes. The blanket lay forgotten on the floor. You, she started, then stopped. A tiny hysterical giggle escaped her. You bent the building. Cyrus shrugged, examining his fingernails. Structurally unsound. As I said, the corner of her mouth quirked up. It wasn't a smile, not quite. But the scent of fear was gone, replaced by something warmer, something like gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. Cyrus felt a strange warmth bloom in his chest, having nothing to do with the temperature. He grunted, turning away to hide the satisfaction in his eyes. Put your blankets back on. Humans are fragile.
The grocery store was a battlefield. Maya pushed the cart with a wobbly wheel, trying to navigate the narrow aisle of the budget mart. Beside her, Cyrus walked with the tension of a bomb disposal expert. He treated every can of beans like a potential threat. This is not food, Cyrus declared, holding up a package of instant noodles. He looked at the ingredients list with disgust. Sodium, palm oil, despair. This is poison wrapped in plastic. It's dinner, Maya sighed, snatching it back. And it costs 30 cents. Unless you have a royal treasury hidden in those torn pants, King Cyrus, we are eating noodles. He growled, a low, rumbling sound that made the old lady in the cereal aisle clutch her pearls. A wolf cannot survive on dried wheat. I require meat, red meat. And I require you to lower your voice, Maya hissed, checking her bank balance on her phone. Negative. She was going to have to use the emergency credit card, the one with the interest rate that made her want to weep. She turned the corner into the produce section. It happened fast. 2 men in leather jackets blocked the aisle, laughing loudly. One of them, a guy with a neck tattoo, looked her up and down as she tried to squeeze past with her cart. Hey there, Tiny, he sneered, not moving. He reached out, his hand brushing her arm. In a rush? Maya froze. The memory of the auction, the feeling of helplessness, surged back. She opened her mouth to apologize, to make herself small, to de-escalate. It was her reflex, her survival mechanism. But she never got the chance. A hand large, warm, and rough landed on her shoulder. It wasn't aggressive. It was claiming. Cyrus stepped up behind her. He didn't look at the men. He looked at the apples. This fruit is bruised, he said casually. Then, he turned his head. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He simply let the human mask slip for a fraction of a second. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost black. He bared his teeth in a smile that promised absolute violence. A low, vibrating snarl ripped from his chest. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of a beast that ate things like these men for a snack. The color drained from the tattoo guy's face. He pulled his hand back as if he'd touched a hot stove. We were just leaving, the man stammered. They scrambled backward, knocking over a display of avocados in their haste to get away. Maya stood there, her heart pounding, but not with fear. She looked up at Cyrus. He was back to examining the apples, his face bored, but his hand was still on her shoulder, heavy, solid. Safe, she thought. The word echoed in her mind. For years, she had been the prey, walking home with keys between her fingers, checking the back seat of her car. "Get the meat," Maya said, her voice steady. She looked at him. "Get the steaks, the big ones." Cyrus looked down at her. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. Acceptable.
The night was full of ghosts. Cyrus sat in the corner of the small bedroom, his back against the wall. He didn't sleep. Kings didn't sleep in enemy territory, and despite the cozy blanket Maya had given him, this world was still enemy territory. Moonlight filtered through the cheap blinds, slicing the room into strips of silver and shadow. On the bed, Maya tossed and turned. She whimpered, a high, thin sound that cut through the silence. Cyrus's ears twitched. He could smell the change in her pheromones. Salt, sweat, cortisol. She was dreaming. "Please, no," she mumbled into the pillow. Her fingers clutched the sheets, white-knuckled. Cyrus hesitated. The life debt required him to protect her body. It said nothing about her mind. He should stay here, in his corner. He should maintain the distance. But the wolf whine in his head was insistent. "Pack is distressed. Comfort pack." He stood up, silent as smoke. He approached the bed. She looked so small in the tangle of sheets. Her face was pale, pinched with some invisible terror. He sat on the edge of the mattress. The springs groaned under his weight. He didn't know how to do this. He was a weapon. He knew how to break, how to kill, how to conquer. He did not know how to soothe. He reached out, his hand hovering over her shoulder. His claws were retracted, but his hands were still rough, calloused from sword and stone. "Maya," he whispered. She gasped, jerking awake. Her eyes flew open, unseeing for a second, wide with panic. She scrambled backward, hitting the headboard. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low, deep, a rumble intended to ground her. "You are in the den. You are safe." She blinked, her chest heaving. She focused on him. The moonlight caught the scar on his cheek, but she didn't look afraid of him. "Cyrus," she breathed. I had a dream. The auction. They were putting me in the cage." She was trembling. Without thinking, Cyrus followed the instinct that screamed in his blood. He reached out and covered her hand with his. His hand engulfed hers completely. "No one puts you in a cage," he vowed. The words felt heavy, binding. "Not while I draw a breath." Maya looked at their joined hands. The contrast, her pale, soft skin against his scarred, olive flesh was stark. She didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch. "You promise?" "I am a king," he said simply. "My word is iron." She let out a long, shaky breath. Her heartbeat slowed. He could hear it finding a steady rhythm again. "Stay," she whispered. It wasn't a command. The magic didn't flare. It was a question. Cyrus looked at the uncomfortable floor, then at the sliver of space beside her. "I will guard," he said. He shifted, leaning back against the headboard, stretching his legs out on top of the covers. He crossed his arms, closing his eyes, but keeping his senses wide open. A moment later, he felt a weight settle against his side. Maya had curled up, pressing her back against his arm, seeking his heat, trusting him to keep the monsters away. And for the first time in centuries, Cyrus didn't feel like a monster. He felt like a shield.
It started with a crash that shattered the world. Maya had been laughing. Actually laughing. They sat on the lumpy couch, the budget mart steaks seared to perfection by Cyrus resting heavy in their stomachs. For a moment, life felt normal. Then the front door exploded. Wood splinters sprayed across the living room like shrapnel. Maya screamed, ducking instinctively as 3 men stormed through the ruin of the frame. They wore tactical gear, black on black, faceless and silent. The smell of ozone and gun oil choked the tiny space instantly. "Secure the asset," one shouted, his voice muffled by a gas mask. "Kill the girl." Time warped. Maya looked at Cyrus. He hadn't moved. He sat very still, his eyes wide, as if processing the audacity of the intrusion. Her brain stalled. She didn't think about the fact that he was 7 feet of muscle. She didn't think about the magic. She only thought, they're going to hurt him. They're taking him back to the cage. "No!" she shrieked. She didn't run away. She threw herself in front of him. She grabbed the heavy ceramic lamp from the end table, a hideous thing her aunt had given her, and swung it with everything she had at the lead intruder. It was pathetic. The man simply backhanded her. The blow sent her spinning. She crashed into the wall, stars exploding in her vision. She tasted copper, blood. She slid to the floor, dazed. Through the ringing in her ears, she saw the man raise a silhouetted pistol. He leveled it right at her forehead. The barrel looked like a black tunnel to nowhere. "Target acquired," the man said. Cold, mechanical. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the flash, waiting for the end. Instead, the air in the room changed. The temperature dropped 50 degrees in a split second. The hairs on her arms stood up not from fear, but from the static electricity of a coming storm. A low sound started. Deep, tectonic, like the earth itself was grinding its teeth.
They touched her. The image seared into Cyrus's mind. The backhand, Maya's head snapping back. The scent of her blood hitting the air, sweet, metallic. His, something inside him snapped. It wasn't a choice. It was a biological imperative. The leash of the life debt didn't hold him back. It whipped him forward. The suppression runes on his skin flared, burning white-hot. But he didn't care. The man with the gun prepared to pull the trigger. Cyrus didn't stand up. He exploded from the couch. He moved faster than human eyes could track. One moment he was seated. The next, he was a blur of violet shadow. His hand closed around the gun barrel. The metal crumpled like wet paper. The assassin gasped, staring at the ruined weapon. He looked up. Cyrus let the glamour fall. He let the human mask dissolve. His eyes were twin pools of amethyst fire. No whites visible. Canines lengthened, sharpening into daggers. Shadows thick. Living smoke poured off his shoulders. "You touched." Cyrus's voice was a distortion, layered with the growl of the wolf. "My queen." He didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed the man by the tactical vest and threw him. The assassin flew across the room, smashing through the drywall and into the kitchen, taking the refrigerator down with him. The other 2 men opened fire. Pop, pop, pop. Bullets hit Cyrus's chest. They flattened against his skin and fell to the floor, useless as rain against a mountain. Cyrus laughed. A harsh, barking sound. He lunged. He tore through them. It wasn't a fight. It was a dismantling. Claws flashed. Shadows lashed out like whips, shattering bones and rending armor. The apartment shook as if an earthquake had centered itself in living room 4B. Within seconds, it was over. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The room was destroyed. Furniture was kindling. The walls were painted with the aftermath of his rage. Cyrus stood in the center of the carnage, chest heaving. The violet fire still wreathed his hands. The wolf surfaced, panting, wanting more. He slowly turned his head. Maya was huddled against the wall. She stared at him. The wolf receded, just a fraction. Shame, cold and sharp, pierced through the rage. He had shown her the monster. He had destroyed her sanctuary. She would run now. They always ran.
The room was a slaughterhouse. Maya stared at the being standing in the center of her ruined apartment. He was covered in darkness and blood. His eyes were glowing portals to another dimension. He looked like an ancient war god dropped into a 1-bedroom rental. He was terrifying, but she was alive. He turned to look at her. The inferno in his eyes dimmed, revealing the panic underneath. He looked, ashamed. He was waiting for her to scream. Maya pushed herself up. Her legs were shaky. Her cheek throbbed where she'd been hit. She looked at the devastation. Then she looked at him. She saw the way his hands shook, not from adrenaline, but from the fear of her rejection. She didn't think. She stepped over the debris of her coffee table. She walked right up to him. The shadows swirling around him felt cold, like dry ice. But she didn't stop. She reached out. Her hand, small, trembling, touched his arm. "You're bleeding," she whispered. There was a scratch on his shoulder, barely a graze, where a bullet had nicked him before his aura fully flared. Cyrus froze. He looked down at her hand on his skin. He looked at her face. There was no horror there, only concern. His voice cracked, shifting back to human. "I destroyed your home. They destroyed it," she corrected him firmly. She reached up and wiped a smudge of soot from his jaw. "You saved me." Cyrus let out a breath that sounded like a sob. The shadows evaporated. The claws retracted. He was just a man again. A desperate man holding onto an anchor. "We cannot stay," he said, urgency returning to his tone. "The syndicate knows where we are. More will come. An army." He grabbed her hand. "We must go. Now." "Go where?" Maya asked, looking at her ruined life. She had nothing left here. No money, no apartment, no safety. "Home," Cyrus said. He raised his hand. He slashed the air, not with claws, but with magic. The fabric of reality tore open. A vertical slit of darkness appeared in the living room, swirling with starlight. "A portal?" Maya looked at the tear in the world. It led to the Shadowlands, a place of monsters and magic. She looked back at her front door, hanging off its hinges. Her old life, the bad jobs, the loneliness, the feeling of being small, lay behind her. She looked at Cyrus. He gripped her hand tight, as if she were the only real thing in the universe. "Okay," she said. She tightened her fingers around his. Together, they stepped into the dark. The portal swallowed them whole, leaving the ruined apartment silent and empty.
The air in the Shadowlands tasted like ash and ancient power. They stepped out of the portal onto the obsidian balcony. The transition was instant, from the smell of burnt drywall to the biting cold of mountain peaks. Below them, the twilight city sprawled, a labyrinth of dark stone and violet lanterns. Cyrus felt the change immediately. Here, he was not just a man in a ruined apartment. He was the apex, the alpha, the king. But as the castle guards rushed forward, spears lowered, Cyrus felt a sickening lurch in his gut. It wasn't fear of his own people. It was the scent, the life debt. It clung to him like a second skin. To a human nose, it was nothing. But to a wolf, it reeked of property. It screamed slave. If his court knew that their king was owned by this small, fragile human, his reign would end in blood before sunrise. "Halt!" the captain of the guard barked, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Maya. He sniffed the air, confused. "My king, this human. She smells of your blood." Maya shrank back, clutching Cyrus's hand. She looked at the armored wolves, her eyes wide with terror. Cyrus made a choice. He pulled Maya flush against his side. He flared his aura, pushing out a wave of dominance that forced the guards to drop to one knee. "She does not smell of my blood," Cyrus lied, his voice thundering across the stones. "She smells of my claim." He looked at the captain, daring him to challenge it. "This is not a captive," Cyrus declared, raising Maya's hand. "This is Maya, and she is your queen." The silence was absolute. The wind howled through the spires. Maya looked up at him, her mouth opening to protest, to ask what the hell he was doing. Cyrus squeezed her hand hard, a silent plea. "Play along." "Queen?" the captain whispered, lowering his head further. "Forgive us, my liege. We did not know." Cyrus exhaled, the tension in his shoulders knotting tight. He had bought them safety, but he had built it on a lie. He looked at Maya. She wasn't looking at the guards anymore. She searched his face. She didn't see a king. She saw the man who had slept on her floor. "Welcome home," he murmured to her. It felt more like a sentence than a greeting.
The dress weighed more than her entire wardrobe. Maya stood in the corner of the great hall, trying not to trip over the velvet train of the midnight blue gown Cyrus's servants had forced her into. The room was a kaleidoscope of nightmares and beauty. Chandeliers made of floating crystals, tables groaning with strange dark fruits. And the people, they were beautiful, lethal, wolves in human skin, prowling around the edges of the room, whispering behind jeweled goblets. They watched her, judging, assessing. "The human queen," she heard a woman whisper. "She looks breakable." Maya gripped her wine glass. She was breakable. She was a fraud. She was a barista with negative $12 in her bank account, masquerading as royalty to hide the fact that she technically owned the guy on the throne. She looked for Cyrus. He was across the room, surrounded by generals. He looked magnificent, terrifying. He hadn't looked at her since the ceremony began. He kept his distance. "You look like a deer who has wandered into a butcher shop." The voice was smooth, cultured, cold. Maya turned. A man stood beside her. He was tall, with hair like spun silver and eyes that were a pale, icy blue. He didn't smell like the others, like musk and fire. He smelled like winter, like cold iron. "I'm adjusting," Maya said, lifting her chin. She tried to channel some of Cyrus's arrogance. "I am Lord Varric," the man said, bowing slightly. A shark smiling at a minnow. "It is rare for our king to take a mate, even rarer for him to choose. Outside the pack." He took a step closer. Too close. Maya wanted to step back, but she froze. Varric leaned in, sniffing delicately near her neck. "And yet, there is something strange about the bond. It does not smell like a mating." He paused, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "It smells like a contract." Maya's heart stopped. He knew. "I don't know what you mean," she stammered, her voice betraying her. Varric smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He reached out and touched her arm. A jolt of cold magic stung her skin. He wasn't flirting. He was testing the circuit. "Oh," he whispered, a look of dark delight spreading across his face. "I see. You are not his queen, my dear." He leaned closer, his voice a hiss in her ear. "You are his leash." Maya pulled away, splashing wine on her dress. "Excuse me." She turned and ran. She had to find Cyrus. She had to tell him. The secret was out.
The map room was a tomb of silence. Cyrus stared at the tactical display, but his mind was on the ballroom, on Maya. Leaving her alone was a risk, but keeping her at his side was worse. If anyone looked too closely at the magic binding them, the heavy oak doors creaked open. Cyrus didn't turn. "I gave orders not to be disturbed. Empires fall while kings are distracted." Varric's voice floated through the room. Cyrus spun around. His hand went to the hilt of the sword at his hip. "Varric, you have no business here." "I found something interesting in the ruins of the auction house," Varric said, strolling into the room. He held up a charred piece of parchment. The original ledger. The terms of sale. For the beast. Cyrus stiffened. His wolf snarled, clawing at his ribs. "It's fascinating legal work," Varric continued, tapping the paper. "The owner has absolute authority. Physical, magical, unbreakable. I am the king," Cyrus growled, stepping forward. The shadows in the room lengthened, responding to his rage. "I answer to no one." "You answer to her," Varric corrected. He dropped the paper. "And that is the flaw in your armor, Cyrus. You are invincible. But she is just meat and bone." Cyrus lunged. He moved to rip Varric's throat out, but Varric didn't flinch. He just pointed a finger at the window. "Look." Cyrus stopped. He looked out the window overlooking the courtyard. Down below, amidst the snow and stone, a struggle was happening. 3 of Varric's elite guards were dragging a figure toward a waiting carriage, a figure in a midnight blue dress. Maya. No, Cyrus roared. He turned to kill Varric, but the silver-haired lord shattered a crystal in his hand. A blast of blinding light exploded in the room. Cyrus shielded his eyes, roaring in fury. When the light faded, Varric was gone. He ran to the window. He watched the carriage tear out of the gates, disappearing into the blizzard. He reached for the bond, the connection that had been chafing him for days. He reached for Maya. Silence, panic, cold and absolute, washed over him. He couldn't feel her. They had blocked the bond. They hadn't attacked his army. They hadn't laid siege to his walls. They had stolen his heart, and with it, the only key to his control. Cyrus threw his head back and howled, a sound of pure, shattered devastation that shook the stones of the palace. The king was gone. The beast was loose.
Darkness smelled like wet stone and old iron. Maya woke to the sensation of cold metal snapping shut around her neck. She gasped, hands flying to her throat. A collar, heavy, thick, and humming with a low, nauseating vibration. She scrambled backward, heels scraping against the rough stone floor of the cell. Careful. A smooth voice purred from the shadows. That is delicate machinery. Lord Varric stepped into the light of the single torch. He looked immaculate. Silver hair, perfect. Clothes pressed. He looked like he was attending a gala, not tormenting a woman in a dungeon. What is this? Maya rasped. Her voice sounded strange, metallic, echoey. A conductor. Varric smiled. He held up a small black gemstone. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the collar on her neck. You see, Maya, the life debt is a fascinating law. It binds the king to his owner. Absolute obedience. He took a step closer. But the flaw in the law is simple. It assumes the owner has free will. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Let me go. Say it again, Varric commanded softly. He squeezed the black stone. A jolt of electricity, not pain, but control, shot through Maya's spine. Her jaw locked. Her tongue went numb. Say, I am yours, Varric. Maya fought it. She clamped her mouth shut. She bit her tongue until she tasted copper. But the magic bypassed her brain. It hijacked her vocal cords, moving her lips like she was a marionette made of meat and bone. She choked. Tears streamed down her face. I am yours, Varric. The horror was absolute. It wasn't just her voice. It was her agency. Stolen. Varric laughed. A cold, dry sound. Perfect. You are the microphone, my dear, and I am the speaker. He grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet. Come, the king is waiting, and I believe you have an order to give him. Maya stumbled after him, legs moving against her will. She screamed inside her own head, but not a sound came out. She wasn't a person anymore. She was a weapon, and Varric was aiming her right at Cyrus's heart.
The valley of the northern wastes was a graveyard of ice and mud. Cyrus stood at the head of his army. Behind him, 5,000 shadow wolves waited in silence, a sea of black armor and bared fangs. But Cyrus felt alone. The bond was dead, silent. It was a gaping hole in his chest where his heart used to be. Across the frozen field, Varric's forces lined the ridge. Traitors, mercenaries. But Cyrus didn't care about them. He would burn them all. He would turn this entire mountain range into a crater to find her. My king, his general whispered, stepping up beside him. We are ready. Give the order. Cyrus raised his hand. Violet fire flared, consuming his arm. He prepared to shift, to unleash the full, terrifying might of the beast. I am coming for you, he roared into the silence of his mind. Then, movement on the ridge. Varric stepped forward. He wore no armor. He was smiling, and he was dragging someone with him. A figure in a torn, midnight blue dress. Cyrus froze. The fire on his arm sputtered and died. Maya. She looked small against the gray sky. Too small. She stumbled, hands clawing at her throat. "Hold!" Cyrus screamed to his army. "Hold fire!" Varric raised a hand. He didn't hold a weapon. He held a small black stone. He placed his other hand on Maya's shoulder, leaning in to whisper in her ear. Cyrus felt the air shift. The wind carried her scent to him. Fear, agony, and something else. Magic. Dark, coercive magic. His stomach dropped. He took a step forward, leaving the safety of his lines. "Varric!" he roared, his voice shaking the snow from the trees. "Face me! Leave her out of this!" Varric didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on Maya. And then, Cyrus heard it. Her voice, amplified by magic, rolling across the battlefield like a thunderclap. Cyrus. It was her voice, but not her tone. It was flat, dead, forced. Cyrus stopped breathing. He knew the trap before it sprung.
Scream. Scream. Maya fought with every ounce of willpower she possessed. She scratched at the collar until her fingernails broke. She screamed inside her mind until her soul was raw. "Don't say it. Please, God, don't say it." Varric squeezed the stone. The magic flooded her throat, drowning her resistance in cold, dark water. "Speak," Varric hissed in her ear. Her jaw unhinged, her lungs filled with air that wasn't hers. "King Cyrus!" Her voice boomed across the valley. She watched Cyrus, standing alone in the snow, looking up at her with eyes full of terror. "I command you." She felt the bond snap back into place. But it was twisted, corrupted. It wasn't a connection anymore. It was a noose. "Surrender your crown," she choked out, tears blinding her vision. "And your life." She tried to bite her tongue off. She tried to stop. "Or I die." The words hung in the freezing air. The ultimate ultimatum. She watched Cyrus. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at his army. He didn't look at Varric. He looked right at her. And then he dropped his sword. The heavy blade hit the frozen ground with a dull thud. "No!" Maya screamed internally. "Fight! Fight me!" Cyrus sank to his knees. The alpha, the king, the beast. He folded. He lowered his head, exposing his neck. He was surrendering. Not because he was weak, but because the life debt gave him no choice. If he disobeyed, the magic would backlash and stop her heart. He was choosing to die so she would live. Maya's legs gave out. Varric held her up, laughing, a cruel, victorious sound. "You see?" Varric whispered to her trembling form. "Love is such a pathetic weakness." Maya watched Varric's executioner step forward on the field below, raising a massive axe over Cyrus's bowed head. She had done this. Her kindness had bought him. And now, her voice was killing him. The world went gray. Hope died. And in the silence of her despair, Maya realized one terrifying truth. She couldn't save him by being soft. She couldn't save him by being human. If she wanted to save the monster, she had to become one.
The snow bit into his knees. Cyrus didn't feel it. He didn't feel the freezing wind or the ache in his muscles. His world had narrowed down to a single point. Maya. He watched her on the ridge. She was crying. Tears tracked through the dirt on her face, freezing in the mountain air. She was terrified, not for herself, but for him. He smiled, a small, sad thing. Varric's executioner stepped into his peripheral vision, a massive wolf in black armor, dragging a double-bladed axe. The metal scraped against the stone. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound of the end. Cyrus's muscles twitched. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to fight, to rip the throat out of the executioner and pile the bodies of these traitors high enough to reach the moon. But the magic held him. It was a heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on his shoulders. The command, surrender your life. If he fought it, the backlash would travel through the bond. It would burn Maya's mind to ash. So he stayed still. He let the snow settle on his eyelashes. He looked up at her one last time. He wanted her to know. He wanted her to see that this wasn't defeat. This was a gift. "I am yours," He whispered into the wind. The executioner grunted, heaving the axe high. The blade caught the gray light of the sky. A pendulum of death. Cyrus didn't close his eyes. He kept them locked on his queen. He would die looking at the only thing he had ever truly loved.
Think. Maya's mind was a storm of static and panic. She watched the axe rise. It moved in slow motion. Time stretched, warping, giving her one final second to scream. But her voice was locked. Varric's hand was heavy on her shoulder, his laughter a low buzz in her ear. Beautiful, Varric murmured. The fall of a king. The contract. Her mind flashed back to the apartment, to the kitchen table, to the night she bought him. You own him, the law said. He must obey. Varric had used her voice to give a command. Surrender. But Varric had made a mistake. A fatal, arrogant mistake. He treated the life debt like a computer program. Input command. Execute action. He forgot that a system crashes when it gets two contradictory instructions at the same time. Maya stared at the axe. It reached its apex. It started to fall. She needed to speak. She needed to override the collar. But the magic was a gag, choking her. She needed a shock. Something to short-circuit the spell. She didn't hesitate. She bit down, hard. She sank her teeth into her lower lip, biting through the skin, through the flesh. Pain sharp, hot, and blinding exploded in her mouth. The metallic taste of blood flooded her tongue. The shock jolted her system. The static in her head cleared for a split second. The collar hummed, confused by the sudden spike of adrenaline and pain. It was enough. Maya drew a breath that rattled in her chest. She didn't scream at Varric. She didn't scream for help. She poured every ounce of her will, every drop of her love, into the bond. Cyrus! Her voice tore from her throat, raw and bloody. Varric flinched, his hand slipping from her shoulder. I command you! She shrieked, the magic of the collar amplifying her voice into a sonic boom that shook the snow from the trees. Destroy everything that holds you.
The axe was inches from his neck. Then, the voice hit him. It wasn't a whisper. It was a shockwave. Destroy. The new command crashed into the old one. Surrender met destroy. Two absolute orders. Two unbreakable laws. Fighting for dominance in his blood. Surrender. Destroy. Surrender. Destroy. The magic couldn't handle it. The paradox spiraled out of control instantly. Inside Cyrus's chest, something snapped. It sounded like a gunshot. The invisible chains of the life debt didn't just loosen. They shattered. The feedback loop exploded outward. Boom! A shockwave of violet energy erupted from Cyrus's body. The executioner didn't have a chance. The blast hit him like a freight train. He was thrown backward, armor crumpling, the axe spinning harmlessly away into the snow. Cyrus stood up. He didn't stand as a man. The human skin couldn't contain the force of the paradox. It shredded. He shifted. It wasn't the partial shift from the apartment. This was the true form, the form of the Shadow King. Bones cracked and reshaped with the sound of gunfire. Muscle expanded with terrifying speed. Fur as black as the void erupted, wreathed in amethyst flames. He grew and grew and grew. When his front paws hit the earth, the ground trembled. He was massive, a wolf the size of a warhorse, a creature of nightmare and legend. He threw his head back and roared. It wasn't a howl. It was the sound of a mountain breaking. It was the sound of absolute, terrifying freedom. He turned his burning violet eyes toward the ridge. Toward Varric. There was no contract now. No debt, no laws. There was only the hunter. And his prey. Gravity didn't apply to him anymore. Cyrus was a storm made flesh. He charged up the ridge, his massive paws shredding the frozen earth. He wasn't running. He was flowing a river of midnight fur and violet flame. The enemy soldiers fired their weapons, spears, arrows, bullets. They disintegrated before they even touched his coat. His aura was a furnace, incinerating anything that tried to hurt what was his. He saw Varric. The arrogant lord stumbled backward, clutching the useless black stone. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He screamed commands at the collar, but the collar was dead. The paradox had fried the magic. Cyrus reached the ridge in 3 bounds. He landed in front of Varric. The impact shook the mountain, sending a crack of spider-webbed earth racing between them. Varric fell, scrambling in the mud like a crab. "Stay back, I command you. The law." Cyrus roared. The sound stripped the air from Varric's lungs. It wasn't a command. It was a judgment. Cyrus didn't bite him. He didn't claw him. That was too dignified for a traitor. He stepped forward. He lowered his massive head, the violet fire in his eyes burning hot enough to melt stone. He opened his jaws, shadows swirling in his throat like a vortex. He snapped his teeth. Snap. He didn't aim for flesh. He aimed for the magic Varric wielded. The violet fire lashed out, consuming the black stone in Varric's hand, traveling up his arm in a flash of amethyst light. Varric shrieked as his power was stripped away, burned out by the king's superior dominance. He collapsed a husk of a man, shivering and broken in the snow. Cyrus turned his back. He wasn't worth killing. He was already nothing. Cyrus looked at the enemy army below. He flared his aura, casting a shadow that swallowed the entire valley. "Leave." He didn't speak the word. He projected it, a psychic hammer blow. The mercenaries dropped their weapons. They ran. They scattered like roaches before the light. It was over. Cyrus stood on the ridge, his chest heaving. The rage began to cool, replaced by a terrifying clarity. The battle was won, but the silence terrified him. He turned his massive head slowly. He looked for the spot where Maya had been standing. She was there, kneeling in the snow. Small, still, fear colder than the ice seized his heart. Had the backlash hurt her? Had he scared her? He took a step toward her, whimpering low in his throat.
The silence was louder than the screams. Maya knelt in the snow, body trembling. The adrenaline crashed, leaving her hollow and shaking. Her lip throbbed where she had bitten it, the taste of copper sharp in her mouth. She looked up. The monster stood over her. He was beautiful and terrifying. A wolf the size of a house, wreathed in purple smoke. His teeth were the length of her forearm. He could swallow her whole. He took a step toward her. The ground shook. He made a sound, a high, desperate whine that sounded heartbreakingly human. He lowered his head. His giant, amber-violet eyes searched hers. He looked afraid. He thought she was going to run. He thought she saw a beast. Maya didn't run. She reached up. Her hand looked like a doll's hand against his massive muzzle. She touched his nose. It was wet and cold. "Hi," she whispered, her voice cracking. The wolf shuddered. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch with a force that almost knocked her over. Then, the shadows swirled. The massive form collapsed in on itself. Bones shifted, fur retracted, fire dimmed. In a heartbeat, the wolf was gone. Cyrus knelt in front of her. He was naked, steam rising from his skin in the cold air. He looked exhausted, wrecked. He grabbed her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed the blood on her lip. "You're hurt," he rasped. "You bled." "I broke the contract," she said, tears spilling over again. "I had to." Cyrus looked at the collar around her neck. It was dark now, dead. He hooked his fingers under the metal band. With a grunt of effort, he pulled. Snap. The metal broke like a twig. He threw the pieces into the snow. "It is gone," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "The debt, the law, it is all gone." He pulled back, searching her eyes. He looked lost. "I am not bound to you anymore, Maya. I do not have to obey." Maya's heart stuttered. This was it. He was free. He was a king. She was a broke barista. He could leave. He could send her home. "I know," she whispered. "You're free." Cyrus stared at her. Then he let out a ragged breath. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into his chest so tight she could feel his heart hammering against her ribs. Then why? He buried his face in her neck. Does it feel like I am more yours than ever?
The throne room was warm. 3 months had passed since the battle in the snow. The winter had thawed, and the Shadowlands bloomed with dark, violet flowers. Cyrus stood by the balcony, adjusting his cuffs. He wore a suit tailored, expensive, and fitting perfectly, but he still felt nervous. The doors opened. Maya walked in. She wasn't wearing a ball gown or rags. She wore a simple silk dress that matched the color of his eyes. She looked happy, healthy. The shadows under her eyes were gone. She walked up to him, holding a piece of paper. "What is this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I found it on my pillow." Cyrus cleared his throat. "It is a contract." Maya laughed. "I thought we were done with contracts." "Read the fine print," Cyrus murmured, stepping closer. Maya looked down at the paper. It wasn't a slave deed. It wasn't a life debt. It was a marriage license. Clause 1, Cyrus recited from memory, his voice soft. "The king agrees to surrender his heart, his army, and his toaster to the undersigned." Maya snorted. "His toaster? It is a sticking point." Cyrus shrugged. Clause 2, the undersigned agrees to never, ever, let the king sleep on the floor again. Maya looked up. Her eyes were shining. "And the exit clause?" "There isn't one," Cyrus said. He reached out, taking her hand. He placed it over his heart. "This isn't magic, Maya. It isn't a law. If you walk away, I cannot stop you. My knees will not buckle. My heart will not stop." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "But I will follow you," he whispered, "to the ends of the earth. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Maya dropped the paper. She grabbed his lapels and pulled him down. "Well," she whispered against his lips, "I guess you're stuck with me." She kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It wasn't a tragic kiss. It was a promise. Outside, the sun set over the Shadowlands, bathing the world in gold and violet. The king had his queen. The beast had his heart. And for the first time in history, the cage was empty.